In my 40-ish years of knitting, I have accumulated thousands of patterns. So I must have them all by now, right? I must have seen everything. Nope, I constantly buy more. And I thought that you might wonder how I go about choosing new patterns, because I try to select them carefully and honestly only pick the ones that I really expect to knit. So every month I do a roundup of super interesting patterns that I found during the month that I thought were worth spending my bucks on. If you'd like to see what they are, follow me into the lounge and see what was wallet-worthy in July. We're going to dive right into the patterns because although I only have 6 to show you, there's a lot involved in each one of these. So this is going to take a while, and I want to try and keep everything as succinct as I possibly can. I honestly really do try. I know some of you don't believe that. On a lark this month, I went into the Ravelry search function and I selected the Hot Right Now search filter. And I browsed through the patterns on the first 5 pages, which totals approximately 250 patterns. I didn't find a single thing out of those 250 patterns that I felt was wallet worthy, except for the small handful of those that appeared there that I already have. However, I subscribe to many knitting and yarn related email newsletters, and they are always good for feeding me some interesting new stuff. But before I even get into those, the first pattern I've got for you today is one that was recommended to me by a viewer. And at first it's going to seem like, so what? But the more I dived into this pattern, the more excited I got about knitting it. So we're going to start with the SABAI top by Susanne Muller. Susanne is a German designer who designs both knit and crochet patterns. And generally speaking, and looking at her portfolio, because she's new to me, I would say that her patterns are simple, but modern and really well executed. Stuff I like. This pattern was published in May 2024, so it's practically brand new. And get this, it already has 642 projects and is in 1,600 queues. That means 1,600 people have put this pattern in their I'm going to knit this lineup on Ravelry. It's knit in a DK weight yarn, and as you can see, it's sleeveless. It's a boat neck. It's also knit top down seamlessly, which I don't always love, but in this case, I like the idea of being able to try this on as you go. Because it is sleeveless, you really want that armhole to fit well and be sitting in the right spot. You don't want it too low or too uncomfortably high. Sleeveless garments have a tendency to fit more closely in the armhole area and under the arm, so you don't necessarily have that flexibility that you often have in a sweater that includes sleeves. And when you buy the pattern, it comes with 2 versions. One with the lovely ribbed edges, and the other just plain old stockinette, no edges whatsoever. So the upper edge of the boat neck just rolls naturally, and the armhole edges will roll in or stay flat depending on where you are on the stitch angle, horizontal, vertical, angled, you get it. This pattern has 6 sizes, so it goes from extra small to extra, extra large. It's not the best size range I've ever seen. It starts at about 30 inches and goes up to 50-inch bust measurement. However, because it is sleeveless, it's relatively easy to size this up by adding width under the armhole. So as you would do the increases when you come down to the armhole area, you would just increase more or more rapidly so that you're not also dropping it right down. So it has potential to be sized up bigger. I know it's not the fanciest pattern, but I really like the look of the clean, kind of professional looking edges on this. And because it's kind of a blank canvas, it lends itself to some really cool creative modifications. When I went in and looked at the projects, people had done it in stripes. Some people had done it in some stripes with some yarn over eyelet rows. It could be color blocked with intarsia color changes and big blocks of color. Or what I find really intriguing is that the whole fabric could be knit with all over texture. This idea really sparked my imagination. So I opened up my library and dug into my stitch dictionaries and went looking for a textured knit purl stitch that looked interesting but wouldn't compete with the ribbed edges and would also lie relatively flat without affecting the gauge of the fabric too much. Some textured stitches can really pull and push the fabric in and out in certain places. That's not going to work for this kind of design. After looking at a bunch, I found something that's going to work in this book, 400 Knitting Stitches, published by Pottercraft. And this is the stitch I found, this guy right here. It's called Cobblestones. Here it is up here. Isn't it cool? I've never seen a knit purl stitch done like this. I really like it. And it's mostly just stockinette with those little reverse stockinette sections in between. So it's going to lie relatively flat. The gauge should be the same as the plain knit stockinette knit fabric. But of course, I will test and swatch first. The suggested yarn for this is Lina, or Lena, I think it's Lena, by Santa's Garn. It's a cotton rayon linen blend yarn. It's actually the same yarn that I'm wearing, except this one is made in Lena, in Tin Lena, Tynn, Lena, which I believe means thin. So it's the thin version of Lena. And it's like the really thin version of Lena, because this sweater has about 11 million teeny tiny stitches in it. But I do love it, and I wear it a lot, and it's super comfortable. I also really like the idea that the regular Lena is closer to a worsted weight, and in this pattern is knit to a DK gauge. So it's going to be a nice firm fabric, but it's going to have this bit of sheen that this has got, and lovely drape. The cost of this pattern is €4.62 or $7.20 Canadian. I think it's well worth it, especially because you get 2 versions of the pattern and it's so modifiable, and it's a fantastic capsule or a basic piece that, yes, is very summery if you wear it on its own, but could also be worn in spring and fall under a blazer or a jacket. It's just all around really wearable. I'm super excited to order some of that yarn and swatch that cool stitch pattern. The next cool pattern I found, I stumbled across while doing a little retail therapy on the Woolly Thistle website. They very kindly sent me a discount code when I signed up for their newsletter. So I thought, what the heck, I will go to the website and look for a kit. So in perusing the kits on their site, and they have a lot of pretty spectacular kits on that site, I must say, I found this one called Mapledown. It's a vest. And from what I could see of it, I didn't really look at it that closely. I just saw, oh, it's a vest. It's got a nice scoop neckline, which I like. It's got a cool little lace pattern, and I liked the colors of the yarn and the type of the yarn that it came with. So I ordered the kit. I'll talk about what I discovered about this pattern in just a little bit. But first, the designer of this pattern is Alicia Plummer, and she's from Maine in the United States. And I realized that I have actually started one of her other patterns earlier this year, but I barely have a start on it, so there really isn't anything to show you yet, but it will turn up in a future video. And I really enjoyed perusing her portfolio of patterns. It seems she's a very outdoorsy kind of person, and so her knits have that outdoorsy vibe for the most part. But I really like her work, and I particularly like this one. It was published in January 2022, so it's a couple of years old now, and it surprised me that there are only 63 projects, and it's only in 189 cues. Beats me. It's a really cute pattern. Maybe it just hasn't had the exposure that it needs. It's knit up in a sport weight yarn, and I will talk more about the yarn in a bit. It's knit bottom up in the round to the armholes, and then knit flat back and forth from the armholes up to the shoulder seams. This can be a bit of a tricky construction for people whose tension has a tendency to change between in the round knitting and back and forth knitting. If you are one of those people, what you will want to do is swatch the stitch pattern both in the round and flat. You might find that you need to change the needle size. You might need a bigger needle size in the round and a smaller one for the flat back and forth knitting to make them match. I know how you feel about swatching, but for this, you'll need to do it. I mean, personally, I think you always need to do it, but this is a really good example of why it's important. You certainly wouldn't want to knit this up and find that the upper part of the sweater is a completely different gauge than the bottom part of the sweater, and you'll have this line going across where it changes. I wouldn't. Maybe you're okay with that. I don't know. You be you. You be you, you crazy kid. This pattern is in 9 sizes and ranges from 32 inches to 64 inches. That's pretty darn good. And like I teased you about before, I bought this kit. So the yarn is Lichen and Lace Rustic Heather Sport. It's a 100% Canadian wool. Yay, Canada. And the color that I chose is Sky. Here it is. Big surprise, right? Big surprise, right? Anyway, and I almost immediately swatched it. And you want to know why? Because when I downloaded the pattern and took a close look at it, it's a little upside down maple leaf. I didn't even realize that when I bought the kit. You talk about me, like I did say at the beginning of this video that I'm picky, right? Maybe not 100% of the time. Anyway, I swatched it right away because I was very excited to try this stitch. It's not a stitch that I had done before. And here's how the swatch came out. How cool is that? Can you see the leaves? It's so cool. I know I say that a lot, but it just is cool. And of course, it's my colors. And it is pretty darn rustic, I'm going to say. But all good because it's a vest, which is going to be worn over a shirt. This is never going to touch my skin, except maybe where if I'm only wearing a short sleeve, I might rub against it, but I don't really wear short sleeves under vests, so not a problem. But this yarn is really lovely to work with, and the beautiful tonal quality of it is just so pretty. I'm excited. I will say though that the stitch pattern is only in charts. It's not written out. So if you are an anti-chart person, this might not be the pattern for you, or you might be able to talk a friend who is bilingual in charts and written to write it out for you if you really wanted to knit it line by line that way. However, the stitch pattern is charted, but what she did do was chart the bodice section separately for every size. So you don't have to deal with this keep in pattern to the last 2 stitches business. You know how some patterns tell you to do that? And then you have to figure out, should I do that yarn over? Shouldn't I do that yarn over? Should I complete this part of the pattern? Should I just do stockinette? It can be really tricky sometimes. This pattern has taken out all of that guesswork, which definitely makes it wallet worthy. It's a 27-page pattern, but you don't have to print out the whole thing. I only needed to print about 10 pages or so after I eliminated all the charts for the sizes I'm not using. I bought this as a kit from Woolly Thistle because I had that discount code. But after I went and did some research later, I realized that probably was a mistake. I ended up paying a lot more for it than I would have had I bought the yarn in Canada. The price of the yarn at Woolly Thistle was fine. The total for the kit came to $62, which included 4 skeins of the lichen and lace yarn in Sky and this super cute Woolly Thistle tote bag, which almost made the whole thing worth it. All knitting is good knitting. And this really cute little thistle stitch marker. And you know what? See this thistle? I was out walking with Oscar today and look what I saw. I took a picture of it. I walked right by a little purple thistle, woolly thistle just like this. I was pretty excited. I'm pretty easily excited. You may have noticed that about me. So I paid $62 for this kit. And then I paid a rather steep amount for shipping. So the whole thing ended up being $83.29 US dollars, which was over $117 Canadian with the exchange. That's kind of a lot for 4 skeins of yarn that I could have bought for $14 a piece from a Canadian supplier. Now, I wouldn't have gotten the cool bag or the cool Woolly Thistle stitch marker, but I could have been more frugal about this product. So the moral of the story for me is to try to buy the yarn locally if I can. I mean, a big part of that was the fact that it was $27 shipping in US dollars, and that means as a Canadian, you can add 30% on top of that. That's a lot of money to have something shipped. The price of this lovely and substantial pattern is $9 US dollars, which is about $12.89 Canadian, and worth it. Next up in today's hit parade is this non-sweater interval training cowl by Carolyn Bloom. This is pretty darn, I won't say it, fascinating pattern. Here's the deal. This pattern looks like complex color work. However, how it's done is the base of the pattern is very simple stranded knitting, which I might modify, but we'll talk about that just a bit. And then hand sewn embroidery stitches are added using those stranded knit intervals as a template. I love this, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The designer is Carolyn Bloom. Her company is Bloom Handmade. She's in the US. She's got a really cool website, so I'll have her link down below, like I always have all the links down below in the description box. Go check it out. The pattern was published in October 2022. This is the astonishing part for me. There are only 18 projects and in 73 queues. What the? Look how great this is. Would you want to wear? I would want to. You want to wear this, right? Like, I'm flabbergasted. This pattern needs some attention. It's knit in DK weight. I'm guessing you could knit it in pretty much anything. It's knit from the bottom of the cowl. It's almost like a capelet cowl because you can stretch it over your shoulders. Bottom up, and the basic color work is stranded, and then it's got embroidery detail added. But you're using that base stranded color work as a guide for the embroidery detail, so you can't do it badly. And she has several pages of tutorial instructions in here on exactly how to do that color work. Well, several pages, 2. 2. I just printed the pattern off like 2 seconds ago. Give me a break. She also gives the option for doing the pattern in 2 colors, so strictly light background with dark contrast stitching, or you could reverse that and do a dark background with light contrast stitching, or you can do a gradient version where you're changing the background colors all the way up through the segments because it's knit in those neat segments, or you could change both. You could be changing the background color and the foreground embroidery. You could use a long gradient for the embroidery. You could use a self-striping. I mean, the possibilities are endless. My modifications for this pattern would be to not do the last couple of sections because I as you know, if you've been watching my videos, I don't like things close up around my neck. So I would leave a more open neck. I might do more segments, but start wider at the bottom and build up to maybe the third narrowest, something like that. And I might also swap out that stranded knit color work for slip stitch color work, which means I only ever have to work one color at a time. It would mean twice as many rows, and maybe it doesn't matter because the embroidery that goes on top would tend to obscure any issues with your stranded color work tension. But we'll see. I'll have to choose the yarn and just swatch and see how it goes. The pattern calls for 100% merino. I've got a whack of merino back there behind me. I'm sure I can find something that'll work. Now, almost all the patterns I'm showing you today are well, no, that's not true. 4 out of the 6 patterns I'm showing you today are DK. The other 2 are sport. So they're all pretty close to the same weight. Neither of these weights are yarns that I have a ton of. Go figure. As I said, I don't have a lot of DK in my stash, but I do have a ton of fingering. And one of the things I have is this gradient. Sorry about the light reflection. This gradient kit of merino earth URTH yarns. I could double these up and use these for a gradient background, and then double and use this fabulous Mad Tosh sock yarn for the embroidery. Cool, right? I know I said cool again, but come on, cool. The pattern cost is $7 US and $10 Canadian. And as you can see by my enthusiasm, worth it. The next pattern is called Smookie by Kate Davies. It might be Smookie, but my gut sense is it's probably Smookie. Kate Davies lives in Scotland. Before I get into detail about the pattern itself, this pattern is sold individually, but it's also part of a collection, a bundle of patterns that she sells on Ravelry called SARK. SARK. I think it means something. I can't remember. Anyway, the bundle, I don't usually go for bundles because I very rarely like more than 1 or 2 of the patterns in a bundle. But this bundle, I might have to splurge on. Not only are there several unbelievably scrumptious textured sweaters, there's also a gorgeous rectangle wrap, which is just dying to be a Nicole Knits sewn wrap over, and so easy because it's already a rectangle. I don't have to redesign it to get it into a rectangle shape. There's a great pair of giftable slippers, also textured, and a fantastic set of textured fingerless mitts and other things. The cost of the bundle is £22, which is about $41 Canadian, but with all that textured patterny goodness in there, I think it's well worth it. I just bought this pattern for now, but I might actually go back and buy the bundle. Now let's talk about Kate Davies for a minute. Kate Davies also does yarn and has some of her own yarns, which you can find on her website, linked down below. And I haven't knit any of her designs before, and I'm quite surprised about that because as I was looking through her portfolio, a lot of those designs I recognize that I've seen before and stopped and gone, ooh, when I saw them, but clearly didn't follow through on any of them for whatever reason. But I was feeling them today. However, this Smookie is the one that really jumped out at me today. So let's talk about this one. It was published in September 2022. There are 293 projects and it's in 1 1,090 Qs. That's impressive. It's in a DK weight yarn. It's got a silhouette that I don't normally go for and would likely modify if I were to knit this. It's designed to be very oversized. In this picture, Kate is wearing this with 20 inches of positive ease. For me, way too much. I might take 10 if there's enough drape in the yarn. And to boot, she's wearing the smallest size, which means if I want to wear it with, now she's a lot smaller than me, so it wouldn't have 20 inches of ease on me. So I'll have to do some measuring, but my suspicion is I'm going to modify it to take some of that width out. Because of the way this pattern is designed, I can see that I can do that without affecting the textured part, which is just in the center. I think on her part, it was very smart to construct it that way. It's knit bottom up in the round until the armholes, obviously, and then cast on to create a little bit so it's like a modified drop shoulder. It actually casts on under the armhole to create the start of a sleeve, and then the sleeve is picked up after. So the shoulder seam runs down to about here. This is where the body of the garment ends, but it is shaped under here. So it's not quite as square and boxy as your standard oversized drop shoulder. And I appreciate that. There's only 3 sizes because it's designed to be so oversized. So the smallest size finishes at 52.5 inches. The next size is 61 inches and the biggest size is 70 inches. So honestly, if you're okay with loose fitting oversized garments, there's a lot of room in here for you to not have to stress so much about the fit. That doesn't mean you can skip swatching. Don't try it. I'll know. I'll send Oscar to have a talk with you. The thing that really gets me going about this pattern is the twisted stitch texture that just pops out in this smooth worsted spun yarn. The yarn the pattern calls for is Kate Davies' own DK weight worsted spun. Now, not worsted weight, worsted spun. That's different. Worsted spun yarns tend to be smoother. Woolen spun yarns tend to be fuzzier. The yarn she uses for this is called Ooskit, and it's 100% natural wool from local breeders to her, not superwash, and it only comes in 3 natural gray shades. If I were going to pick one of these, I'd probably pick the lightest one of the 3. I really would want to see that incredible texture in the stitches as clearly as possible. That tends to be best on lighter shades of yarn. But if I did feel like putting some color into this, she also has another DK weight wool yarn called Schahalion, which comes in lots of beautiful colors. So I have options. This pattern is £6.50 or about $12 Canadian. And I think worth it, even if it's just for that textured stitch combination on the front. The last 2 patterns I've got for you today are by the same designer. I'd never heard of her before. These are not popular patterns by any means, but I think they're pretty amazing and would be super fun to knit if you're feeling a bit adventurous. The pattern designer is Evelyn Siatra. She lives in Greece and she designs for the Canadian company Biscot Yarns. In 2015, Evelyn won, and I'm going to have to read this off my notes, the People's Choice and first runner-up award of the Mohair South America Vogue Knitting Warmth of Mohair Blanket Design Competition. Yeah, that was a mouthful. Here's the blanket she designed. I think she should have won the whole thing. I found these patterns on the Biscot Yarns website. Biscot showed up in my email with something else. And I went to the website and I was browsing and I ended up looking in the patterns and I found both of these and then discovered they were both by the same designer. And I just wanted to have them both in my wardrobe right now. That's not going to happen, of course, but that was my initial feeling about these. So the first one I want to talk about is called Stella, and it's just a bottom-up, knit in pieces, seamed together combination of stripes and stranded knitting. And I love it. I don't even hate the color combination that she's got here, although it might not be exactly how I would do it. I'd probably tone it down a little bit. This pattern was published in February 2023, so it's been around for almost a year and a half. It has one project and is in only 16 cues. How does this happen? When I see stuff like this, it makes me feel that there's got to be this whole undiscovered, maybe even thousands of amazing patterns that people just haven't found yet. Maybe due to a lack of marketing, or maybe because the construction isn't something people think they can do. People can knit this. I'm going to convince you, you can knit this. It's in DK weight yarn, so it's not too heavy. Totally knittable. It is knit in pieces and seamed. Don't be scared of that. It's not that hard. And the front is knit in modular construction, which I always think is really interesting. So the way it's done is half the front gets knit. Stitches are picked up from the start of the V-neck to the hem, and then knit out to the side seam for the bottom half of the second side of the front. And then the stitches are picked up starting at the V-neck across to the side seam and knit up from there to finish that front. The back is all knit in one piece. It's mostly stripes. There are only 2 sections on the front of stranded knitting, and it's a pretty simple pattern to follow. I don't even think you'd have to catch floats. I probably wouldn't. And then there's one more section of the stranded knitting at the cuff of one of the sleeves. If you really don't want to do the stranded knitting back and forth, don't do it. Replace it with stripes. Replace it with solid sections. I just like how graphic it is. It's different. You don't see stuff like this. It's a great V-neck. It's knit in pieces and seamed, so it's got structure. I want it. The sizes run from extra small to 5 extra large, so 28-inch bust up to a 65-inch bust. That is a great size inclusive range. It requires 6 colors. I really love picking out colors for projects. So 6 colors, yay! Color selection party. I haven't picked anything out yet. The suggested yarn is one from the Biscuit Yarns website, and it's 90% merino and 10% silk. However, the other pattern I want to talk about today, which I found on the same website, is this one called Mikela, and it uses the same weight of yarn, well, a tiny bit different. It's sport weight, and Stella called for DK. The difference between sport and DK is pretty tiny. You can fudge it by changing your needle size. This one uses a yarn called granola, which is 70% merino and 30% hemp, which I'm guessing is the granola part. Was published in April 2022. There are 5 whole projects of this one, and it's in 40 cues. It's also knit in pieces and seamed, and there is quite a bit of stranded knitting in this one. And just to add a little smidge of extra challenge, it's also in tarja on the front, because the section of stranded stitching you see on the front here doesn't extend all the way around to the side seam. There's a solid panel up the side. So you're going to have to do some intarsia between that stranded section and that solid panel on the side. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and it's kind of busy, but if you're careful with the colors, it's just different and fascinating. And I think it would kind of be potato chip knitting. Like, I wouldn't want to stop because I'd want to keep seeing what comes next. I get it. It's not a beginner pattern. There's a size range from 32 inches to 60 inches. Pretty good. It only takes 3 colors. So a lesser color selection party for this guy. Both of these patterns are $7 Canadian. They're only available on the Biscuit website. They are not available for purchase on Ravelry, although there are links to the patterns on the Ravelry website. You just can't buy them there. So what do you think? Anything there that intrigues you? I know, these were a little different, right? These were some pretty lower profile designers in a lot of cases, which I really enjoy. It's nice to see some different things. Before we say goodbye, I thought you might be curious about what this is around my neck. This is a knitted, beaded collar made from a kit I got from Laura Nelkin. I'm not going to tell you too much about it today because I'm going to do a whole video when I make the second one. I bought one Laura sent me too because she's so sweet. And it's made from linen blend yarn, beads, and this handy dandy thing. Have you seen one of these? I'm not even going to tell you what it is. No knitting needles, just this, and this. I made this in a couple of nights. I couldn't stop once I started. Laura was not wrong. There will be a link down in the description box if you're too curious right now and you can't wait for me to come out with a video. Go check it out. It's called the Cuentas Collar. So that's all she wrote for today, and by she I mean me. Here's last month's Wallet Worthy patterns. If you haven't seen this yet, go take a look at what's there and keep those needles clicking. I say goodbye. Oscar says goodbye, and we will see you next time. Bye.